Good evening and welcome to Sunday night, not so live, recorded. And I want to ask you to be sure, if you have some questions or observations, send in to me. And the best way to do it is Sunday night prime at EWTN.com. Or if you want to, write me a note and you can send it in to EWTN and they will get it to me. And I hope we're all getting used to the new way of doing this, that we don't have the possibility of talking to the audience. Now, today we're going to be talking about a very interesting visit to Australia. As you know, the Holy Father went to Australia 3 years ago, and we have with us now a young man who is the director of young adult outreach of the Archdiocese of New York. But he comes from Sydney, Australia. And I want to welcome Patrick Langrell, Pat, and he's director of young adult outreach here at the Archdiocese. But we have some very interesting things, not just for the young people. I'm representing the old people. So, Pat, tell us a little bit. How did you end up getting to be working in New York so far from Australia?
Sure. Well, it was a very sort of fun and exciting adventure about how it all happened. God worked through a lot of different amazing sort of instances, but basically I was studying back home in Sydney at the University of Notre Dame, Australia. I was doing a degree in philosophy and also doing a degree in law at the same time. And I was working with Cardinal Pell for the organisation World Youth Day, for the soon-to-be arrival of Pope Benedict in Australia, with hundreds of thousands of pilgrims across the world. And so while I was working at World Youth Day, I ran into a lot of Americans when they were out here during July 2008, many of them the Sisters of Life, who had their Love and Life site at the campus that I was studying at. And so it was through working with the Sisters of Life and also with some Catholic and secular news agencies in the US and from other places that I became good friends with a lot of Americans. And then a year or so later, I was asked by Cardinal Pell to take part in a conference at the UN with the Catholic Family and Human Rights Institute. And so because I had an interest in human rights and natural law, Cardinal Pell asked me to take part in that program. And so I was over in New York in 2009, early 2009. And that's when I met up with a lot of the people who I'd met during World Youth Day in Sydney. And some of them told me about this position that was becoming available in the Archdiocese of New York. So
here you are.
So then here I am.
That's amazing, all the way across the world.
Yeah, it is.
And as I told you before, I've been to Australia a couple of times. That's giving retreats, and I had a wonderful visit there. I have relatives who run a sheep station way out in Australia. And if you had gone to Australia, you'd notice that Americans and Australians are very similar. They're people from the British Empire who went out and faced the edge of the forest, you know.
That's right. Yeah, we're very similar in so many ways, just Americans have a very funny accent. That's the only difference between...
Well, I noticed that the Australians have too. Well, now, one of the things that you have been doing very much here for the Archdiocese as director of youth adult outreach was the program called Love and Responsibility. And I want our audience to see just some of the impressive pictures that you've got of those meetings here in the city, all made up of young people. And there they are. That's right outside of Old St. Patrick's Cathedral downtown. And there was an old cathedral, there is, before we had the new cathedral. And we have a number of other shots here of the crowds This is our group outside the city, outside in the street, quite excited. Did you enjoy that?
I did, yeah. There was a lot of people who were really keen to offer an opportunity for young adults to sort of navigate the difficulties of living in the city as a young adult. And this event and many other events that happen in the city try and cater to the particular struggles that young adults in the city face. And one of the biggest struggles is in our relationships with others, and also how we conduct our lives ourselves. And so Love and Responsibility in NYC was sort of a result out of a longing of a few young people who really wanted to try and offer an opportunity for other young adults, men and women, to engage in discussions about over Pope John Paul II's book, Love and Responsibility. And so these discussions were held there and drew people from not just from around Soho, where it was held next to St. Patrick's Old Cathedral, but from all over the city and from outside the city, to try and help young adults grow in their faith life and in how to cultivate and grow authentic and mature relationships. It's funny because a lot of young people just face so many struggles living in the city. I remember I was having a conversation with one young lady around the same sort of area in Soho, and I was just talking to her, and she didn't know I was Catholic, and she was a hairdresser, and I asked her, I said, in your pastoral experience with talking to a lot of people as you're doing their hair, what do you think like the relationship life, the dating life is like in New York? And she said, well, I just think it's all about convenience, like whatever just happens to be convenient for one person. If someone, for example, if someone didn't live on my 6th line, it just wouldn't work out. So here's just sort of a snapshot of just the contemporary sort of culture that young people face in New York. And this girl actually then started coming along to some of the discussion groups, as well as many others like this, like Love and Responsibility. There's things like Theology on Tap, amazing initiatives all around New York that really tap into a hunger, a desire, a thirst that young people have to knowing the reasons behind their faith and then cultivating that in their own life by integrating those reasons, and that makes sense not only just to the head but also to the heart in their lives, because that's you really sort of got to build those foundations in the city of New York.
Well, it's an interesting thing that here in New York we have among young people one of the most beautiful things are sisters, new communities of sisters. Sad to say, many of the communities of the old days that I went to school with, huge communities of sisters, are just dying away. The average age is in the 70s and close to 80. And yet we have wonderful young sisters of a traditional approach to sisters. Here's a couple of pictures here of our Sisters of Life. I'm anxious to show them. Here they are in the park on skates. And isn't that there you are, New York City. Right there, there's our sisters right in the middle of the whole situation. And these are Sisters of Life and very good sisters. There they are, right there. And I don't know whether that's Central Park or not, but...
That's Bryant Park, right on 42nd Street. Yeah.
Bryant Park,
just
right in the middle.
Right in the middle of the heart of the city.
And we're very delighted. Now, Patrick, I'm going to call you Father Patrick. Patrick.
I actually get called Father Patrick on the phone. People call my office thinking that I'm the priest.
Well, tell us a little bit about the church in Australia. I was there a couple of times giving retreats, and I love Australia because of the interesting creatures, koala bears,
kangaroos,
yeah. Wallabies. But tell us a little bit about how is the church doing in Australia?
Well, the church in Australia is going well. It certainly had an injection of enthusiasm and grace and outpouring of the Holy Spirit since World Youth Day. But even up until that time, the church, ever since about 1986 overtook as sort of being the largest. It's the largest group. Is the Catholic Church in Australia occupies just a little over a quarter of the population. And around 76% of Australians are Christian, but the Catholic Church is the largest in Australia, which is very different from the beginning when the Protestant majority was slightly larger. And so democracy has been favourable to the Catholic Church in Australia, and it's allowed the Church to flourish particularly well. In terms of religious participation, it sort of goes up and down, and for the last few years, at least from research sort of shows, but there are a growing number of very vibrant Orthodox young adults in Sydney, Melbourne, and other parts of the country who are really taking the faith to the colleges, to the young adult populations, and really sort of shifting the culture around to sort of really engage with, in somewhat can sometimes be a very hostile secular environment.
The Holy Father went to Australia.
He did, yes.
And he was very well received.
He was really well received.
Marvelously.
Yeah. That's right. I mean, in a country which you can see some of the photos here from World Youth Day. This is Cardinal Pell and Bishop Anthony Fisher, who were introducing the Pope to the Prime Minister in Australia just at his arrival in July 2008. So that was for the World Youth Day events there, which really promote a huge change in mainstream media's attention.
There's the Holy Father with a koala.
That's right.
I love koala.
It was quite funny. This is at the retreat centre in Kenthurst, where he stayed for the 2 or 3 days prior to his major events. And the Sydney World Youth Day organisation was looking forward to hopefully getting a good shot of the Holy Father with a koala bear. Unfortunately, Pope Benedict was less inclined to be close with animals as Pope John Paul II was, so he was just he patted it very lightly, then sort of let it go and didn't touch anything else. But this is a great shot now of the Opera House and the Sydney Harbour Bridge.
Yes.
This is the papal arrival during World Youth Day.
That's the great sign of Sydney when you go there.
It is, yeah, very popular tourist spot.
And Sydney is a beautiful, clean city around the harbour. Huge, big harbour. And I had relatives from long ago went to Australia from Ireland, which a great many Americans would have some Australian second or third cousins in Australia. Yeah. The ones that wanted to go further went to Australia. The rest quit right at New York.
Yes, that's right. Well, it really is the ends of the world, Australia, to get there.
Yes. Now, what we're going to be talking about is not Australia, but how do we reach out to young adults in our society? And I'm sure our audience, not only in the United States, but in Ireland, England, Europe, we have many, many people watching this program. How do you get the message of the faith, of the gospel, of faith to young adults? Because we're all aware that the secular culture is, if not always hostile, at least dismissive of religious values. Sometimes we say that secularism is hostile. I notice, at least here in New York, it's not particularly hostile. It just dismisses. There's not even enough interest in religion to become hostile. They just dismiss this, except you're in a city with huge numbers of religious people. Places of worship all over the place, from the center of the city to the great cathedrals and synagogues, all the way to the poor sections of the city, which are filled with little storefront churches and deeply religious people. So we're going to come back to this as our visitor from the other side of the world and tell some of your observations about young adult believers. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Well, now, this evening, we're chatting with Patrick Langrell, who is New York Archdiocese Director of Young Adult Outreach. And we pointed out that he comes from Sydney, Australia. But now, something about the challenge. Here we are in a secularized society. And yet, there seem to be a good number of young adults who are interested in religion and religious people. What do you say?
Well, I think that's right. I mean, one of the suggestions, at least in Australia, that I'm used to, but it's very much the same over here, I think, as well. Cardinal Pell rightly notices that there's a temptation more so to trivialize Christ than to really crucify him.
Explain that.
Well, sure. Well, what that sort of means is that the culture, instead of sort of going head on, this is at least the sort of dynamic, I think, in Australia and in the US. In the UK, I think it's definitely more upon the crucifying angle of Christ, of what they do over there. But over here, with the sort of pluralism and everyone sort of having their own beliefs, and what Pope Benedict called ultimately what he recognized as the dictatorship of relativism, is the idea that, well, all sort of values are equal, and just religion or spirituality, which is the popular term today, which is sort of sees the rise through New Age sort of movement, it's just a matter of sort of picking and choosing and sort of finding those options and those lifestyles which are most compatible with what you happen to desire. And then sort of our ethic is just about sort of figuring out the best way to get there, and you should just be tolerant of other people, and I suppose only of other people who don't believe in tolerance. But it's that sort of cultural milieu, it sort of saps people of any energy to really stand up for what they believe in. And so the emphasis is more on sort of trivializing Christ, like, well, Christ is one amidst many sort of different options, and if it's good for you, then that's okay, and if it's, it's just personally not what I choose. And so within that nature, there's not so much of a sort of a direct attack on Christ, it's sort of like an indirect, subtle way that gets past most people. And so it's very difficult sometimes trying to talk with people like that and trying to encourage them, or at least make them open to seeing the reasons behind the Catholic faith and the beauty behind it, because they're not sort of passionate against it, they're just sort of indifferent to it. And I think indifference is a lot harder to deal with than hatred. At least someone who sort of despises something or is against something usually has a reason, usually obviously only emotional or sort of sub-rational reasons, but they may have intelligible reasons why they're against the Catholic faith, and they will be often willing to engage with you and share them. But it's a lot harder trying to meet people who just don't care, because it's very difficult to even engage in conversation with them. So that opens up the question was, well, then how do we reach young adults? How do we reach a generation of people who don't care? And I don't think it's as easy just to say that everyone doesn't care. I think a lot of young adults, a lot of people my age and around this age in 20s and 30s have gone through the results of the 60s and the 70s, which was sort of epitomized on just do anything you want, try anything. And they've done everything. We've tried everything. We've exhausted every possible opportunity of hedonism, of sort of, the pleasure-filled lifestyle, of, all different types of lifestyles. And the result is that a lot of young people sort of feel like it's empty, or that there's something missing. And a lot of the times they can't quite put their finger on what it is, but they're looking for something more. And that's intensified in New York. I mean, it's a common universal experience, but in New York in particular, it's intensified because people have so many attractions and temptations and things to do, and lifestyle's so busy, and once they get on the track, they just keep going, that it's very difficult in that sort of culture to be aware of those other things, that alternative way or that more important way of living, because you can just be so distracted and swept and sort of just caught in with the lifestyle of what everything's going on. And particularly for young adults in New York, I mean, a lot of people, New York attracts people from all over the world, but all over the US. You know, people will sort of study at colleges. They may live in Ohio and study in Chicago and then work in New York. So you've got this dynamic where a lot of people have moved to New York only for about 1 or 2 years, but are sort of trying to find a job, trying to look for a work. They're, you know, up-and-coming artists, or they're just trying to get a job anywhere. And so they know they're only going to be there for a short period of time. They don't know anyone. They don't, you know, their family structure, their, you know, college life, their community life that sort of structured them and held them together and grounded them and sort of gave them a sense of accountability and ethics that would guide them to sort of make right decisions is all gone. So people experience a deep sense of loneliness in New York, which is why when Archbishop Dolan at a young adult mass in November 2009, his homily focused precisely on loneliness and on that sort of nature of that tension that young adults feel, especially in the city life. And so his answer to this, his answer to how to build up young people in the church, was to welcome them in with open arms into the church, into the communion of the church, a communion of friendship with others and ultimately friendship with Christ. And he used the description of the arms of, or the walls of St. Peter's Square, which were designed by Benedict. You see the arms of the square come out like this, and you've got all the pillars and all the saints all inside. He said that that's what Benedict was trying to do by that was reference the fact that the church exists to hold everyone close to her and to bring everyone into the fold, and to show them that friendship which can be established with Christ. It brings harmony in all aspects of our life. And so this was his desire for the church in New York, and which is exactly what we do as Catholics. We welcome people into our lives, into communion with Christ. Pope Benedict, these are some photos of Archbishop Dolan at the Young Adult Mass in November 2009, where he made that homily. He ends up, after the Mass, during the procession, the priest all walked off and at the end of the procession, but he sort of skipped out of that and then decided to greet all of the young adults at the end of the Mass. So here he is meeting some of the postulants from the Sisters of Life. But it was a really beautiful homily that he gave, and it reminded me as well of more recently, or at least last year, a homily that Pope Benedict gave at the Palm Sunday Mass in Rome at St. Peter's, where he said that all of us, and he used the metaphor of scaling a mountain. And he said, all of us are scaling this mountain, and when we're scaling it together, we need to be roped in. He used that term, roped in, which is a mountaineering term whereby you rope yourselves to everyone else, so that when you're scaling the mountain, if one person falls or has trouble, that the others combined can help him get back up and find his feet and his placement again to then scale the mountain. But that's the idea of the community of the church, the Catholic community, which is universal, that it's all embracing, that we are saved not in some sort of isolated sense, but that we're saved by virtue of our communion and our relationship with others. And many young adults, myself included, find that we really grow in the faith and extend ourselves in the faith, often through the influences of our friends and through those who we aspire to by virtue of their remarkable holiness and sincere humility and desire to be one with the Lord. And that's powerful. That sort of desire can have a huge effect on other young adults. So how do we reach out to young adults? By first sort of making ourselves so less and praying for that virtue of humility, so that God can act through our lives, so that we can discern our particular unique personal vocation that we're called to, and by inviting others into that communion and into that fellowship, that friendship with Christ, which can then be an example to others and to the world, to the culture which is yearning for something like that. It's desiring that sort of friendship.
An interesting set of problems here. In New York City, in the New York area, there are a number of Catholic, so-called, universities and colleges, and some of them quite large. One was the largest university in the world, the St. John's. And I attended a couple of them at times, and then I went to Columbia, and I taught there. And unfortunately, I would say that we're so busy educating people that we're not being particularly Christian or Catholic. Now, there are problems with that. In a city like New York, you're studying or teaching psychology. You have people with all different kind of religious backgrounds or none. But that's why we're there. We're having all this trouble to have this Catholic university, and it isn't. It's a secular university. One of the best known Jesuit universities in the United States, one of the oldest, University of St. Louis, declared itself, or somebody, that it was not a Catholic university. Well, I would have to applaud them because it was true. But how tragic it is, because one of the best ways that the church get into the life of large numbers of young people is through education.
Yes.
And I think that we, as members of the Catholic Church in the United States, should face the fact that we are not doing what we're supposed to be doing. Now, the Cardinal Newman Society identifies about 32 or 33 authentic Catholic institutions of learning. But there are 225. And I know men and women who are professors in those universities, and they deeply regret that there is such a secular, unbelieving attitude through the whole thing. And sad to say, some of the faculty are religious or priests. And they don't have very much faith either. I would beg them to leave. Somebody is teaching, is a religious or a priest, and doesn't really believe. For heaven's sake, do us a favor. Go. As the Pope said, too bad that so many left, and too bad a few more didn't leave with them. And it would be better, because it undercuts the strength of the church. Now, you've gone to a Catholic university in Australia, which is kind of a new idea in Australia, right?
There aren't too many Catholic universities, no, and this is at least the university I went to. I was there actually the first year it started, so I was one of the first 400 or 500 students who went in, and it was the first private Catholic university that was started by Cardinal Pell, who saw a need for an authentically Catholic university that realized its mission and its sort of identity in the Catholic Church and the Catholic tradition of faith and reason, and sought to create a possibility for young adults and undergrads and grads now to learn in different areas. So they have areas of law and philosophy and ethics and nursing and education and the arts and business and commerce, and trying to cater that to teach young adults. Many universities across the US do this as well, with a focus in liberal arts as well, so that all the students have a grounding, not so much in highly specialized areas per se, just in and of themselves, but see how their particular focus, whether they go on to do grad studies, relates not just to that specialized area, but also to sort of the fundamental, the heart of the liberal arts, the sort of tradition of looking at philosophy and reason and faith, and using that and seeing how all of these different specialized things can be integrated into a holistic view of our place in the world and in society and in culture. And I think that's an important emphasis that a very good university in general should aspire to present a holistic view rather than sort of a highly specialized view that sort of leaves people very experts in one area but not knowing how it fits in with life.
We're going to come back to this in a minute because we got our break.
Sure.
But there is no question that an integrated approach to teaching is essential to Catholicism.
Yes.
And but we'll be back in a couple of minutes. Stick with us. This interesting young man, by all means. Now, Pat, while we've been talking about this, I'd like to hear, and I think our audience would, here you are from the other side of the world, running a large program for young adults outreach in New York City. But how about around the United States? How about in other places where EWTN is on, in Europe, I think in Australia, and New Zealand, I think, around the place. Give us some ideas on how do you do a young adult outreach?
Sure. Well, I'm very blessed in New York because there is just such a huge range of dynamism, of enthusiastic people, men and women, who have got together with other people and have seen a need for a particular event or formation opportunity, and then tried to create something for a community and then build up a community. So I've been blessed to sort of have a bird's eye view of all of the great things that are happening within New York. And because there are so many things that are happening, which I can go through a lot of them for you, my role is mainly to not so much run these events or have programs myself, but to let the young adults, to connect all of the young adults up in New York to my website, which I can then let them know about everything that's going on, because New York's a very big city and it's very difficult for young adults to know what's going on in the city.
What's your website?
Well, the website is catholicnyc.com, so catholicnewyorkcity.com. That's it, that's the home page. People from there, this is a great platform that was set up by the person who occupied my position before me, Daniel Schreck. He did a great job creating a large range of ways for young adults to be connected into the scene in New York, to know what's going on. So there's a calendar where all the events are listed up all around the city and elsewhere. People can also sign up to my email updates. They can find out about housing opportunities in New York. They can look for volunteer events. If they have a house they want someone to move in with, they can do that as well.
It's wonderful.
It's a great tool. There's a map of New York which shows all the locations of all the parishes, of the adoration times, mass times, confession, everything that someone would want to know about Catholic life in New York. It's sort of like a one-stop.
Type it up?
You can just go there, search through the website, and everything should be at your fingertips. So it's just trying to make things easy for people, because New York is a very tough place and it's very hard to just sort of go around and find about what's going on, because there's so many things going on and so many attractions that just constantly grabbing you. All you have to do is walk through Times Square, and it's sort of that nature, except throughout the whole city, extended across the whole time while you're in New York. So this website and my outreach is designed to make it easier for young adults to get plugged in. And so, because there are so many great events, like if you're an artist, if you're an up-and-coming artist, or you just sort of you're an actor, or you're a musician, which a lot of people who come to New York, they'll come to New York wanting to know what's going on. There are opportunities. There's an actors' chapel, St. Malachy's, near Times Square. There's recollections that are being organised by Kevin and Rachel Collins for young men and women in the artist industry to get the formation, the spiritually, for the interior life, to be then throw them back out into whatever sort of artist venue there are. There's actors and screenwriters working with Storm Theatre, Peter Dobbins's organisation up at the Church of Notre Dame, that runs a great number of plays which appeals to a wide secular and Catholic audience, which really seeks to evangelise people through theatre. And they've done a great amount of work with the Blackfriars Repertory Theatre. Peter Dobbins was actually mentioned in this book by John Allen, who's a Vaticanista, sort of expert on things related to the Vatican. He writes for the National Catholic Reporter. He wrote this book, and part of it dealt with a trend, sort of a growing evangelical trend within the Catholic Church in different parts, of people who have great gifts and skills who want to use them for the church. And he called Peter Dobbins a guerrilla evangelical, sort of these guerrilla warfare, going into the trenches of the culture, the heart of where the culture's at in the movie and entertainment industry, and trying to seek to evangelize through that medium.
Mention John Allen's book.
Sure. John Allen's book is dealing with the trends.
The title.
The title. I'm trying to remember the title.
Look up John Allen.
You can look up John Allen, and I think it's the future church. How 10 trends are revolutionizing the state of the church, and it's a great book that looks at not so much sort of the big sort of cultural issues, but sort of trends that are happening across the universal church. So he places a big emphasis on the growing church in the South, in places like Africa and in South America, and shows how these trends are going to be shaping the future of the church for the next generation. So it's a fascinating book and a great read. Also, he's very knowledgeable in areas dealing with the Vatican.
John Allen is in my mind writing a letter if he'd come on our program.
Sure, and he'd be great. He's a very good speaker, and particularly good insight as a journalist into what's the state of the church and sort of different sort of related issues. So that's a good book.
Now, one of the things that as an old New Yorker, as I was a little boy, I looked over the shoulder of the Statue of Liberty at Manhattan from my kitchen, where I was a little boy, over the statue. One of the things that New Yorkers we're not easily impressed. At the end of the world, and the music of the Last Judgment is going on, the New Yorkers will be bellyaching about the music. They think it's too loud.
That's very true.
We're a tough group. But I would say this, and it's worthwhile saying. My impression, working for the Archdiocese for almost 40 years, that there are parishes in the inner city that are very successful and outreaching to people in a variety of ways. There are religious parishes and diocesan parishes, and you get to a parish and find out what's going on. It may not be so obvious, but you ask, and you'd be surprised how many things are orphaned by a parish. It's quite beautiful. And sometimes it might be one priest, and he's doing all this help from the parishioners and doing a very, very good job. It's a wonderful experience. Now, our audience is listening in many places. Try in your best you can to encourage your parish. Bring it up to life. And sometimes, I can tell you, as a priest, sometimes the priest doesn't seem to be rising up to the occasion. Maybe he needs some encouragement, that nobody's showing great interest, and after a while that begins to wear you down. People and priests together make a good parish. And God bless that marvelous group of people called deacons. When I first heard about the permanent deacons, I was a transitory deacon. When you're becoming a priest, you become a deacon. But I thought, this is a wonderful thing. And we now have permanent deacons all over the place. And a permanent deacon is a mixture between a layman and a cleric. He's sitting on both sides of the communion rail. It's very, very... is he a clergyman? Sort of, kind of like. Is he a layman? Sort of, kind of like. He comes between both places. This is what we desperately need in the church right now. More integration between the people and the clergy. And I have to say, in my own experience in New York Archdiocese. Our present Archbishop works very, very dedicatedly in that way. He reaches out. You may have seen something of the Archbishop of New York. He's bashful.
It's true.
Now, tell us, working in your particular job, how do you get do you get much reaction, positive reaction, to young adults? You're offering these different programs. What about it?
Yeah, I think a lot of young adults are really interested in, and respond well to many of the things that happen in New York, because a lot of them are just looking for something. They want to know something to do. And like you said, however, you recognize the sort of typical sort of jaded New Yorker attitude that, they're sort of criticizing everything a lot. The reality is that a lot of people in New York have so many things that they could be doing on a Friday night that it's very hard sometimes to try and reach them, which is why the church and a lot of the gifted individuals who serve the church by the events that they run in New York, who I'm blessed to know and to help promote their events, realize that you have to try and really be creative in the way how you reach out to people through the events that you do. But for those ones that have, they've really sort of used their gifts in particular areas, whether through the fashion industry, through the music and the movie industry, through sporting, through the culture, through the arts, all these different things, finance, there's dynamic individuals there, is they've tried to create opportunities that really meet the young people where they're at and allow them to draw them up through the formation in the interior life and all through their particular avenue of interest, whether it be finance or fashion or things like that. So the response has been very good, and it really allows the young people themselves to draw upon the gifts and skills that God has given them and to be able to share them with others. And it's about building up a culture of communities that can work together to sort of really represent the church in New York.
Now, how do you reach out from that Chancery building, that great big building on 55th Street, the east side?
Sure.
How do you get in touch with all these people?
Sure. Well, most of the time I'm always at the events. So my sort of average day will go from, meeting people for breakfast, having breakfast meeting with people, or lunch or dinner, and sort of networking people together, introducing them to others, and then being present at all the events, so the Theology on Taps, the Frassati events, the Sisters of Life events, the things with the Friars, the Catholic Underground, all these things like that. And while I'm at these events, I'm just meeting people and just becoming friends with them, and inviting them to other events and introducing them to other friends, just sort of being a very normal Catholic. It's not something different that anyone else of us should do. We go to these events, we meet others, we try and build friendships and community. So my main role is sort of going to these things, being present, building friendships with them, and then putting them on my email list. I ask them if they'd like to receive email updates from me. And so that's the main thing. So my website acts as a sort of the funnel which draws all these people to it. They sign up on the website themselves, either through friends, may have told them about it, or through I contact them. And then the primary way who I sort of reach out to them, at least mainly, is through the website. It's through the email updates that I send and the updates on the calendar on the internet.
Now, our program goes on Sunday evening, 7 to 8.
Yep.
Very, very few young people are watching television at that hour.
That's probably true.
That's probably true.
Yep.
So what I'm doing, imploring you to get hold of the grandparents and the parents and to get them down the address of our email.
Yep.
And get them to get it and give it to the young people in the family. I realize very much the only young adults in New York who are watching this program tonight are in the hospital. They're getting better from something.
Or you could get a Facebook account, Father Benedict, and then you could do video blogs live on Facebook. To young people.
Now, you have to explain to some of these old people like myself. Tell us a little bit more about Facebook. What do we do?
Okay. Well, Facebook is a social networking site where people can create their own profiles and put information in about who they are and put up a photo of themselves. And they can add other friends on Facebook who they can connect with, and they can invite them to events and send them emails on Facebook and post articles or video clips. That up. And so yes, you just go to the website, facebook.com. I feel like I'm doing a promotion for Mark Zuckerberg here. But I mean, in terms of how it can assist in evangelization, I think it's a great tool, a great medium by which you can post articles, YouTube clips. You can connect friends up to events and alert them about what's happening. It's just another medium like my website that I have that people can get information out directly to other friends, Facebook friends.
Well, see, because I don't even ever have time to even look at television, ever. I found out that I'm on Facebook, but somebody put me on.
Someone put you on Facebook?
Yeah. I had anything to do with it.
So you've got to create an alternative account and say, this is the real Father Benedict Groeschel.
Yes. Well, that's bad.
The only problem is you can only have 5,000 friends until it caps you, and I'm sure you have more than 5,000 friends, so that may be a problem.
Well, what is the 5,000?
Well, that's just the limit. You can't have any more than that, unless you create a fan page. So we can create a Father Benedict Groeschel fan page, and then you can have millions of fans, which you can directly...
Do you pay for that?
No, it's all free, so you can do this. Okay. I could set it up for you if you'd want.
Yeah, maybe you should do that.
Sure, I'll set it up. First thing when I get back to the office, I'll tell my boss I've got to create a Facebook fan page for Father Benedict Groeschel. And then you can call me up and we can sync up articles.
Whatever you do, don't give them my address.
Okay, I'll keep that private.
Now, a number of the people watching this program are grandparents, older people. We're around on Sunday evening at 7 o'clock.
Sure.
And we've lived at a most incredible time. We started out just with the radio. I can remember the first television sets were about 4 inches across. This little thing with Howdy Doody. It was all black and white, and it got all kinds of snow in it and everything else. I mean, I've been around, and I remember a wet Sunday afternoon. I was coming up the step in my grandmother's house in Bayonne, and I heard a voice on the radio, and I have asked Congress for a declaration of war. It was Franklin Roosevelt. It was the beginning of the Second World War. And what a horrible, terrible war that it was. But it's long, long ago, you see. Now, as I'm leaving, getting ready to get out of here, packing up, looking forward to my visit to Purgatory, which I'm hoping very positive about. I'm positive about Purgatory. I think of the immense young people of the world and how immensely dangerous the world is. We don't think about it right now, but atomic weapons and beyond those, thanks be to God, they have not been used. Tragically and scandally, the United States dropped 2 atomic bombs on cities, not in the Army, not on the Navy, but in cities, Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And the Pope said that day, Pope Pius, it was a day that would live in iniquity. And may it never, ever happen. And thanks be to God, it has never happened again. But people should pray, not just Catholics, not just Christians. All people should pray for peace in the world. There's a whole lot of us in this little planet, this little boat, and it's necessary that we should try to be careful and think well of our fellow human beings.
That's right, and it's not just sort of some sort of external peace in sort of the absence of just the mere absence of conflict that we're after, but obviously the peace that comes with Christ, which is the peace that we have with Him and with others, and even within our own choices and actions, that we can have lives of virtue and of integrity whereby things are all put in place. We have sort of an integrated life and in our relationship with others, so that the peace that we can give to others, the peace that we reference in the Mass to each other, can be an interior sign and a reflection in our relationship with others, a peace that can be truly seen in a life of one who is conformed to Christ. That's something that we can present to the world.
And the world is not going to be perfect. It's not going to be a whole lot of people agreeing with each other. I hope to have very shortly on the Apostolic Delegate to the United Nations, Archbishop Calicut, on this program. There he is in the midst of the UN, which is not a world organization. It's a place for people to come and argue. And he does a wonderful job of representing the Holy Father there. We have just closing up, O Lord, in your goodness and mercy, bless this fine young man and all the young people who have watched this evening, and all of us, that we may seek to please God. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you very much, Pat.
Thank you, Father Benedict.
And remember now, you've got to keep us going. My good old friend, Mother Angelica, I'm hoping down this spring to get down to see Mother. She prays for us. She's quite incapacitated, but she has done an immense good for the members of the Church and the whole human race with EWTN. And so do pray for her as she's struggling with the effects of age. God bless, and we'll see you next week.